Fancy. All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Ravi Mickelson. I'm one of the co-organizers of Climate Link. We're a meetup, a networking group, collection of startups, investors, researchers, advocates, activists, enthusiasts, and supporters of the mission to transition to a clean and fair economy. And every month we host these events to showcase mostly technology startups building solutions to various climate problems. Tonight we are covering food waste, which is a very big issue. If you look at Project Drawdown, which is 100 solutions to stopping climate change, it's one of the top issues. I believe it's number 6. So very important. And next, so let's see. If you go to our meetup page, you'll see that tomorrow night we've got a happy hour event with women in clean tech and sustainability. And then next week we're doing an energy trivia night with PG&E, and they're one of our regular hosts. They're energy center. And then in June we're covering some technology to make solar more affordable. But tonight, as I said, we're covering food waste, and we have 2 startups, LeanPath, based out of Beaverton, Oregon, and Past Plates, which is based in San Francisco. At least that's where I met Rafid, the CEO, at a Starbucks, of all places. And so with that, I'll butcher their introduction, so I'm going to let them do that. And Andrew, I'll pass it over to you, and then you can open your video and share your screen.
Okay, sounds great. It's nice to join you guys and to be able to do that remotely without getting on a plane. And I'm actually in downtown Portland, although LeanPath is based in Beaverton. I don't get to go there anymore, or I don't have to go there anymore, I guess, depending upon how you look at that commute. So I'm going to go ahead and I've got a few slides, so I'll share those, and just give me a second here to launch into that. We'll do that. So quickly, I'm the founder and CEO of LeanPath, and I'm excited to be included as a startup, although we've been at this a while. I've been doing this for about 16 years. And that's actually, I think, more a commentary on how long it takes people to change their behavior than on anything else, because we've been working on food waste prevention the whole way through. And what I'd like to do is just give you kind of an overview of the problem that we're working to solve, and a little bit about our business. And then I think, Robbie, we've got a little bit of time for questions, I believe, after that. So yeah, we're working on specifically food waste prevention. And so I want to frame that right up front. There are a lot of different things, and we're going to hear today from the folks at Past Plates about some other approaches in terms of recovery or marketplace activity. We focus on trying to source reduce the food waste to begin with. So that's the perspective we come from, and we tend to work in hospitality and food service. So a few stats, and Robbie, you mentioned you didn't have someone from Project Drawdown, but I'll try to do the sort of required food waste statistics. So about 1/3 of all food produced in the world is lost or wasted, and that is, of course, a huge number and almost hard to wrap your head around when you think about the scale of agriculture and the amount that's lost, over $1 trillion in value. I think one interesting way that people have framed this is to think of this as if food waste were a country, and if it were, it would rank as the 3rd largest emitter of GHGs after the US and China. So that's why it's way up on Drawdown's list. And in the original printed book, Robbie, it was number 3. And so when I heard number 6, I was, of course, immediately panicked and went to their website, but now it's number 1, according to their website. So at least under one of their scenarios. So of course, it's not just a climate issue, it's also a resource efficiency issue when you think about all the water and other inputs, petroleum-based inputs as well, that go into producing food that gets wasted. So this is a major issue, and I think the thing that's exciting for me about it is it's really a nexus issue, and this was something that we didn't know when we initially began working on this problem. We thought we would help people become more efficient, and pretty quickly we realized that we had sort of accidentally begun working on one of the highest leverage problems you could work on, because if you work on food waste, you're working on climate, you're working on issues around land use and soil health and hunger. All of these things are sort of wrapped together when you look at our food system with the immense amount of inputs it requires from so many different directions, and the emissions to air, soil, and water on the other side, and then the amount of land use and destruction that's gone on to try to feed the world. So when you work on reducing food waste, you're actually working on just about everything that's important, at least to me. And so as a result of that, it's been identified as one of the Sustainable Development Goals. It's goal number 12.3, which is to reduce the world's food waste in half by 2030 on a per capita basis. So it's definitely getting attention. People are understanding it, whether it's Drawdown or it's SDGs. But how you actually go about doing it, it's such a big problem. Where do you begin, right? And so where we work is in the kitchen, and typically, as I said, in food service and hospitality. And we take the view that this is kind of like the elephant in the room that most people have been so used to working with that they are numb to it. They don't see it anymore. The waste is just there. It's just how we do business. It's a normal course part of how things work. And one of the first challenges here is to get people to wake up and just recognize that this is an elephant in the room, and we can work on it and we can improve it. But first we have to see it, and with fresh eyes. Now, there tend to be two types of food waste in the world that I work in. Pre-consumer, which would be waste that is in the kitchen. It's overproduction, spoilage, expiration, and trimmings, items that are thrown away by food service operators. And then there's post-consumer or plate waste, which is what's left on a guest's plate at the end of a meal. They may look like the same problem when you see them in a compost bin, but they happen for different reasons. And so when you go to root cause and understand it, you've got to go to two different sort of well springs of root causes, and also countermeasures are going to be different. So on the pre-consumer side specifically, we find that somewhere between 4 and 10% of food that's purchased tends to be thrown away just as pre-consumer waste with the clients that we work with. And so that's a pretty stunning number. $40,000 to $100,000 of every $1 million spent on food never reaches a guest. So the good news is this is a financial opportunity, and that's one of the reasons that people will pay attention to it, and then we can get the environmental and social opportunities to be addressed concurrently. This is what it looks like, and we take photos of wasted food, and I like to show this just because, it's not what you think. It's not a single scrap here or there or a mostly empty pan. In many cases, it's perfectly beautiful, edible food that's being discarded, and for any number of reasons, which we'll talk about, and often full pans and stuff that looks great. Not all of it. We definitely have a range of photos that don't look so good, but in many cases, you look at them and see opportunity. And so we find that there's one sort of through line. If you look at kind of the narrative around why people waste food, it often has to do with managing risk, and this is in food service and hospitality. Risks like I don't want to run out of food and disappoint a guest, or I'm worried about food safety. So that old cliche, when in doubt, throw it out, is one of my least favorite phrases. I think it's time to update that, right? Like, when in doubt, why don't you study the issue and remove the doubt? Because, it's not such a great idea to just chuck things spuriously. So we find, though, that people tend to err to the side of throwing away things, and they merchandise more than they need so that customers aren't disappointed. They may make more than they need so they can reduce their labor. They think they're getting benefit from these things, but the reality is that often, this is waste just being used to pay for a problem where people think it's free and solve another problem by wasting more food, and it's not the case. So we find specifically there are 3 things that show up in our data sets, and they're really asymmetric, or at least you see a heavy massing towards overproduction is the number one reason that we see wasted food in food service and hospitality. People just made too much. Secondly, trim waste from fresh produce and from meat. And then spoilage is actually a relatively small number compared to everything else. So really this problem is largely about how do you get overproduction under control. When you do that, when you reduce food waste, the financial argument is pretty is pretty awesome, right? You have your savings on food. You don't waste food. You don't have to buy that food. But you also have savings on energy and water, the labor that's invested in making the product. You don't have to pay to have it hauled away. These are all the benefits of food waste prevention. And so there's a pretty strong ROI when people work on this problem because of the fact that it's not just a nexus issue environmentally and socially, but it's effectively a financial nexus issue as well. So all of these things add up. And like I said, this is the good news because this is one of the ways that we can draw people out and work on this together, get alignment and get capital flowing to work on this problem, is because there is an ROI around it. So that's the general landscape, right? It's a huge problem, massive opportunity within food service. That people are kind of often, accepting of it too much. We've got to get them to think of it differently, understand they're managing risk in a way that's actually really expensive. So what can you do about it? Well, you can work on prevention, you can work on donation, you can send it to compost and landfill, and there's a hierarchy, just like reuse, reduce, reuse, recycle. There's a food waste hierarchy, right, which is basically source reduction, then donation for use by humans, then donation for use by animals, animal feed, and then you get down to industrial uses like energy, and then to compost, et cetera. So there's a hierarchy, and we want people to really work that hierarchy. The challenge is that on the prevention side, people often sort of bow and acknowledge it, bow to it, validate it, say, of course, prevention is first and most important. But the actual amount of work that happens on it is not nearly enough. And so the concept of prevention is illustrated here, right? We're talking about the absence of something that we used to have. So reducing off of a baseline the amount of food that we're wasting. And so since it's invisible, it's hard for people to see it unless they're measuring it. And that's where LeanPath comes in. We help people measure food waste. Donation, of course, is pretty clear, and food recovery, I think people understand that part of the hierarchy, and you're going to hear more about that tonight from the other speakers. Not specifically donation, but about recovering excess edible food and making sure it goes somewhere useful. And then compost is of course, also very familiar. I have a bit of cognitive dissonance on compost. I call it the romance of compost because it's such a great story about closed loop and, basically taking, things that were rotting and making soil out of them and then growing food in it and bringing it back. The challenge is that compost is not at the top of the hierarchy. And there's some interesting research that sort of goes into looking at this, which was done at Ohio State in 2017, where they took a group of, actually three cohorts went through this experience where they basically gave them free lunch and measured everything they threw away. And the first group got a lecture on basically something unrelated to this topic, personal finance or something, and they set what they called was the uneducated group. They weren't educated on food waste, and so they set a baseline there. The second group came in and got the same deal, eat whatever you want, we'll measure what you're throwing away, and they got a lecture on food waste. And shocking, their food waste per capita went down 77%. The third group came in, got the same treatment, they got the same lecture on wasted food, and then they were told that everything that they didn't eat would be composted. And the amount that they wasted was basically back up almost the same as the control group. And so I think it's just interesting that we have a finite pool of worry, right? There are only so many things we can actively think about. And so while we want people to understand the full hierarchy, we can end up excusing it. And people can go, oh, as long as I composted it, everything's fine, right? Same as recycling, right? As long as I recycled that, no big deal. And so, our challenge is to get people to recognize that prevention is really high leverage and that people should be working on that and not letting other things get in front of it. Do that first, then focus on feeding hungry people and the highest leverage activities. So how do we do that? We start with the view that kitchens are really like factories. They're just producing different kinds of food products. And so we could probably learn from them what we learn in factories and manufacturing from management science like Lean and Six Sigma. Couldn't we apply some of those thoughts just to a kitchen, which is a factory? And so that was kind of the early inspiration at LeanPath, was to say, could we bring those thoughts in here? And what if we applied measurement? Could we create data-driven discovery and team-based problem solving and things that are proven that work in manufacturing. Why not in a kitchen? Of course, the challenge is that measuring is a little harder than it sounds if you're trying to do it manually and tacking it onto an existing operation. So our core view is that prevention starts with measurement. That when you measure, two things happen. You get data, which is super useful because you can learn, right, what you're wasting. You can change your forecasts and your menus and your purchasing. But importantly, you also get a behavior change because just the very act of measurement is a communication of your values. And so people raise their awareness when you're working in a kitchen. You have more communication and more engagement because, hey, someone's asking me to measure food waste. Like, I guess that's important here. Whereas before, it's the elephant in the room. It's just going in the garbage, right? So one of my favorite quotes is a Buckminster Fuller quote. If you want to teach people a new way of thinking, don't bother trying to teach them. Instead, give them a tool. And so, and through the use of it, they'll lead to new ways of thinking, right? And so that's kind of the theory that we practice at LeanPath is we put measurement tools into kitchens and we help people measure and modify very slightly their workflows and their behaviors so that they become more conscious of food waste and address it. So that's the problem space that we're in. Specifically, our company, I'll just tell you a little bit about us. So our vision is to ensure a sustainable future by eliminating food waste. And of course, we will be one of many working on this. It's not any one organization or area is going to solve the whole problem. It's huge and complex. Our mission specifically, though, kind of our niche in this is to make food waste prevention and measurement everyday practice in the world's kitchens. And, we take the view that, those words everyday practice are the hard part, right? If we can actually shift behavior to the point where people measure their food waste routinely in the same way they do things around sanitation and customer satisfaction, we have the ability to really, really have a huge impact on this problem. And so that's what we're trying to do. And everyday practice requires technology to make it easy. And so that's what we've been doing, is working on tools to make that measurement process possible. We deploy in almost every food service segment. Now it's over 35 countries that we have customers, 2,500 deployments. So what began really in Oregon as a, kind of an initial approach to be more efficient with food has become something where we're finding there's a global movement around food waste prevention, and people are looking at it holistically around financial, but also social and environmental issues. So we have offices in a number of places, but the Pacific Northwest is our home. We work with a lot of different folks, from hospitals to colleges to hotels to large food service companies. What you will notice is a common thread through every one of these logos is that most every one of them has been heavily impacted by COVID-19, in that they are either closed completely in the case of hotels, or in many cases colleges and universities, or dramatically different context in healthcare. So it's interesting to see this time, and we can talk more about that. What I think is kind of interesting, though, kind of about where we are right now in the journey, is that for many years we just chased pilots, right? We try to get people to try this new thing and change the way they worked, and you get someone to put their foot in the water and try it in a few places, but not get it really at scale. And so we're just at that point now where that's changing, and we're starting to see large companies starting to scale up food waste prevention globally. And this is one example, which is Sodexo, where they've committed to measuring food waste across their entire business in a partnership with us. And, that's how we're going to have impact, right? We need the biggest players to be adopting a normal everyday practice, right, around this. And so we're starting to see that, or at least pre-COVID-19, we've begun to see that really pick up momentum. A lot of questions on what happens now in terms of how this industry recovers. Of course, Google's done a tremendous job with it in their operations as well, and paying a lot of attention in the employee dining world, corporate dining. And overall, we've reduced about 18 million kilos of food waste since 2014, and continues to tick up. So real psyched about that. How we do it is that we look at kind of, I guess you could say, three problems. That food waste is difficult to measure, it's cumbersome to analyze, and it's hard to engage staff. So our job at LeanPath is to work on those three. And so our goal is to make food waste tracking super fast, to allow people to automatically discover prevention opportunities, and then to drive results through behavior change tools that engage people and focus them. So that's what we do. We basically put a system to measure in place. People bring food that typically is pre-consumer food waste most of the time, although sometimes it's post-consumer. Bring it to one of these systems, measure it, answer a couple of questions about what they're throwing away and why. And we have a range of solutions that do this, from tablets to floor scales, bench scales, and it's really going to vary based on the operation, how much space they have, how much volume of product is being pushed through. Sometimes we have photography where we're taking images, and in other cases, we're just grabbing weights. And as you might imagine, we're working all sorts of things around what we can do with that photography and, sort of other sensors. Everything then moves into the cloud, and we have kind of an analytics platform that helps people understand what they're wasting and what they can do with it. And one of the big learnings from this is chefs are not that psyched about sitting in front of their computer to analyze data about waste. They would prefer you push it to them, so we do that too. And then we're very much focused on how we can help people drive change by tracking what they're wasting and then making recommendations to them about what they should be working on, setting goals, reporting out to the public about what they're doing, how the performance is going on waste, sort of kind of closing the loop on making this stuff very both workflows to drive action as well as signage to make it public. And what we find is when people do that, they tend to actually get a huge amount of engagement. A team that's usually responds to this by saying, wow, we've been wasting food for so long and we don't like it, and we want to make it better, and we're jazzed to be involved in that. And one of the things that kind of focuses me is this image, which is where I'll wrap up tonight, which is an image of a garbage train cruising down the Columbia River Gorge here in the Pacific Northwest. And this trash from Seattle, they ship to Oregon. So as an Oregonian, I guess I have a vested interest in that. And, but also just generally what interests me about this is, who has the ability to pull a full rail car off a train like this? Who can have that much impact? And when we're talking to frontline food service teams around this, we show them this picture and we say, you guys at home probably can't solve this problem. You're not going to pull a full rail car off by yourself. But at work, in a college or a hospital or a hotel or a large restaurant, you're going to have the ability to make huge impact on this. And so one of the things that excites me the most is that the global change makers on food waste are working at the front lines of food service. They're there, they're in restaurants, often working anonymously with not nearly enough respect, and they are the ones who are going to fix this problem, at least this part of the problem. And so if there's a silver lining on the COVID situation, I think people are waking up to the importance of this workforce and the amount of impact that they have, and this is one of those ways that they do. And so where we need to go from here is a decade of action. We've got 10 years to hit this SDG, but realistically, we've got like 5 or like a lot less than that, right? Like we got to get moving. Urgency is needed. And, we're going to have to focus on prevention because that's how we get the most significant sort of climate impact and resource efficiency impact. And, at the end of the day, it's about a bunch of things that are financial on the surface, but really fundamentally, it's about our environment and our society. So I'll stop there, and hopefully that gives you a little overview on LeanPath and what we do.
Normally there's a round of applause, but you're not going to be able to hear that with all these people muted. Thank you so much, Andrew. Thanks, Andrew. If anybody has questions, feel free to put it in the chat if you want me to read it, or you can put it there, and then I'll call on you, and then you can unmute yourself. But I'll kick it off. Is there one sector or another that's done, basically, is there one single sector that's had the greatest impact? I know like every hotel function I've been at, talking about overproduction, really like 2x. And at all the events I did, like I tracked like what we did, and then it's like, okay, people are actually going to eat, like 1.1 of these items per person, and say that there's going to be 33 people because they're going to make 40 portions of this. So I would imagine like that they would be the biggest saver because they're probably the worst. But is there a different one?
So I'll answer that question. Maybe I won't put good or bad on it. I'll just say there in the industry is a spectrum of folks who cook to order on one end and folks who do bulk production on the other end. And there's a spectrum between, right, the sort of versions of mixed models. But the people who have the most waste are the ones who have to prepare in advance. They don't know who's eating. They don't know what they're going to eat. Versus, we walk into a restaurant and order, fine dining tonight. They say we have the sea bass. We order it. They make it for us. They're not going to overproduce. If they run out, they run out. We accept it. But when you go into a cafeteria or some environment where, like a sports stadium, where you have to, food has to be served super fast. It all has to be ready beforehand. And that's the area, Robbie, that we really target the most, because they have the toughest job, frankly, and the biggest volume of impact. So that's going to be across the segments that we work in: corporate dining, hotels, healthcare, education, sports, military, senior living, cultural attractions like zoos, and any place where you've got like that sort of group feeding operation going on. And so, yeah, once people understand what they're overproducing, then they develop the confidence to tighten it up. And that's one of the biggest things with hotels is no one wants to run out and disappoint a guest, a catering client. It's your wedding, right? You're at a hotel. The idea that they could run out of food, sort of impossible for people to imagine. And just think about me here. I've been doing this for 16 years, and I host an event for people in my home. I don't want to run out of food, right? It's a really strong impulse. So helping people build the confidence to know that yes, indeed, you can cut it closer and closer and not transgress to the point where you disappoint. And it's finding that balance.
Yeah. Quick follow-up, and then we've got quite a few in the chat for you to hear. So then do you take in, so if you, let's say with the stadium or one of these other sort of advanced preparation facilities, do you then say, okay, do you take in like attendance at ball games and provide it's like, okay, per person, like this is usually how much gets eaten. So if they know what the expected attendance is, that's how much they prepare, or is it something that they do?
Yeah, so that's a short question, but that could be a long answer. So there's a whole production management software space that we don't do. We view it as there's production planning tools, and then we're in the behavior change business. We're the ones who make sure that whatever production plan you created, you actually execute, and that you don't have deviations and improvisations, which are often the case. Someone sees a production sheet, make 100. They say, I'll make 110 because I don't want to run out. But the reality was you needed 90, and they already planned the extra 10, right? That sort of thing. So we tend to work on, yes, helping them see normalized metrics. So that would be amount of waste per person, per cover, per ticket, per patient day, per whatever it is in the environment that's relevant. It could be per attendance in a sporting arena, and understand how those normalized metrics are ranking over time and against others in the sector.
Yeah. All right. Let's jump over. Cindy.
All right.
Let's see.
I mean, I can ask it, or you can just say what I was asking. How you measure, like you said, as soon as people start to see how much they're wasting, their behavior is going to change. So how do you measure it before, like estimate your waste before impact? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's actually quite difficult, right? Because to get that sort of unmodified baseline is actually very hard. And so what we do is we build their baseline off the first few weeks that they're recording, and we tell them don't intentionally make changes. We know there will be changes though, because the reality is once you start measuring, it does change. We have gone out though, and we've done blind studies where we, in a site before we roll out, our team will go in and do measurement, and then we'll compare that to what we get when they start without people knowing what's coming. And so we've been able to get a sense of kind of what's the degree of difference. And it's actually like 25%. Like you've got 25% more waste when we're recording it than when they commence the process. And so the question is, what percentage of that variance is immediate behavior change because, oh, wow, we're being asked to record, versus what percentage of it is quality of measurement, right? Because you're never going to have perfect compliance. And our team, that when we do it, we're going to do it more rigorously than when that's the only thing we're doing, than someone who's doing, a bunch of jobs in a kitchen. So it's hard to get to the bottom truly of the baseline. So what starts happening, right, is as soon as you can measure things, you start to want ever greater degrees of accuracy, right? And there are some things we have to look more directionally at what's happening. What's the trajectory look like? What's the percentage change off their baseline? Is it moving in the right direction? And then how does it check out against our other benchmarks? Does this look anomalous relative to other organizations of the same size at the same stage? So there's a little bit of a heuristic kind of multiple things you look at to try to get a sense of, is that a valid baseline? And if it is, then we stamp it valid, and then we move forward. If it's not, we'll keep working to get to the point where it's valid. But it's a very, if I could just wave a magic wand and get the proper food waste data before we started, life would be easy.
Great. Thanks, Andy. Do you mind, can I share your slides? Can you send me can I share your slides with the group? Great.
Sure.
Thank you. A couple people have asked, I'm just going to read the questions unless somebody really wants to ask it themselves, just for time efficiency. A couple people have asked for a specific example of implementation strategy and what the impact has been.
Yeah. So first of all, overall, we're seeing people routinely reduce food waste by 50% or more on pre-consumer, 50. So I mean, they're basically knocking overproduction down dramatically, and they're making a dent in the other areas as well, expiration, some with trimmings, although trimmings are less fixable than other things because there's sort of a minimum amount. Watermelon rind is a watermelon rind. So yeah, overall in aggregate, we see significant impact. It's usually somewhere between 2 and 8% of their food purchase budget. So if they're spending $1 million on food, usually they can find at least $20,000 in savings, up to significantly more than that. So they end up coming out positive. As far as examples of what they actually do, so what's funny about this is none of it is rocket science. If we all just sort of brainstormed what we could do to reduce food waste, the hard part's not the idea. The hard part is getting the idea to be executed over and over and over again, millions of times a day across thousands of operations and hundreds of thousands of employees who are each making decisions in game time, right? Just at that moment. So it's things like, do you when you get to the end of service, do you go make another pan of eggs at the end of breakfast? Or do you just put a sign up that says, well, cook eggs to order for the final half hour of breakfast, right? Instead of putting a whole pan out. Or, when you're going to make, you need pizzas. Do you make whole pizzas so you have variety, or do you put half the toppings on one half and half on the other, and you get 2 varieties out of one pizza? Those kinds of very simple things. What size pan you're using? How deep is it? How big is it? As you get to the end of service, are you decelerating and moving into smaller pans? How are you building your back stock? Are you, overbuilding your hot holding, or are you kind of using a Kanban process where as you pull a pan, you make a pan? How deep is your stock? All those kinds of questions, they're not super complex, but it's are people going to do the right thing? And every time. And so getting them to be aware of it and go, okay, you know what, I'm not going to make more right now. I'm not going to put that other pan out. I'm not going to, fire up one more bunch of mashed potatoes. We'll give it a shot and see what happens.
Is it realistic, or is there a way to do this in home cooking?
Well, I mean, certainly, yeah, you could use our equipment in your house, but the ROI wouldn't be very good. We've been asked that question, a lot, and we've always wondered, could we find a way to put something in the home? And I don't think the economics are there quite yet. I mean, of the many things that people are willing to quantify about themselves, that whole diet tracking thing has been really hard to crack. And so this is one derivative of that, not just what are you eating, but what are you wasting? I think probably the best, most likely bet on this, I think Amazon and Walmart have some patent activity around, smart bins that scan UPCs as they go in and try to use them for replenishment. So, in terms of getting, pushing product at you, but you also learning what is being wasted. But it's hard. Food food is really tough because it does, it comes in each, it comes in weight, it comes in liquid, volume measures, and it gets transformed when you cook it from you add water, reduce water, mix it with stuff. Doesn't come with a barcode on everything.
Yeah. I imagine also for home, it's more on the spoilage. It's like, oh, I forgot I had, broccoli or cucumbers or whatever, and then it's nasty and you don't want to use it.
Yeah, or you didn't forget, and you just decided you wanted to go out for dinner tonight, and and it's there, and it just doesn't last as long as you hoped.
Yeah.
But yeah, spoilage in the home is going to be a major driver, and it's about planning. Planning and rotating stock, being aware what you've got. There's a great book Dana Gunders wrote called The Waste-Free Kitchen Handbook, and she's based in the Bay Area and was at the NRDC for many years. Now she runs ReFed, which is the nonprofit for food waste, rethinking food waste through economics and data. And they've got some good advice for the home, and particularly how to organize your fridge.
Oh, great. I'll look it up and add that into the notes for the email that I send out to everyone. Couple more questions, and then we'll swap over. How do you think, as COVID is impacting food supply chains, what will the impact be on food waste? It's definitely the commercial kitchens, your business, like what's that going to happen there more longer term?
I haven't given that any thought. No, joke. That's all I'm thinking about 100% of the time. The amount of dislocation in the supply chain, and you've probably seen all the reports upstream, dairy losses, produce losses, the disruption in the meat supply chain. It's, look, there's profound impact upstream at the retail level. Everyone's shut, right? Take out very modest volumes relative to normal operations. So I think everyone is just acknowledging that the world of food service is going to be fundamentally different. And so the salad bar is probably gone, at least for a year or two. Self-serve stations are gone. There's going to be staff service. Social distancing is going to drive different menus that can be served more quickly in a way where you can actually move people through in a still distance, but fast enough through operations. Trying to essentially open a restaurant now, in our mind, or any food service, is going to be like opening a new business, because you don't know your demand patterns, you don't know how your menu modifications are going to perform. And so our expectation is that there's going to be very high risk of a lot of food waste in food service and hospitality when we reopen, and people are going to have to be really on it. They're going to need to pay attention, make fast, agile modifications to what they're doing. And it's going to be critical because labor costs are going up, right? To do all this staffed service, you're going to have more people presumably working, and so your food costs are going to need to adjust. So right now, though, it's anyone's game what it ends up looking like, but we can see that just the operations are going to be dramatically different, and there's a lot of risk at that point. Food waste kind of thrives in an unpredictable time.
Yeah, great. Last one. So you've got the imaging camera. Do you do any other sensors or spectral analyzers or measuring ketones, anything to measure, spoilage within the food on like the pre-consumer side or post?
We do not. Certainly it's something that, we've considered. The challenge is finding kind of what the cost profile is of the devices. And, our goal is to be everyday practice, which means, there's a relationship, but, if it's a scientific instrument, it's not going to be everywhere. And so the challenge is balancing that sort of, the impact and perfection, right? Perfect's the enemy of the good. So, our goal is to try to be, have something that works for everyone. And, but yes, we certainly see the opportunity with a range of sensors, whether you're looking at spoilage questions or identifying things with various approaches other than visual spectrum approaches. So yeah, we certainly consider it, but right now our focus is not there.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And if there's any more questions, drop them in the chat. And Andrew, if you can stick around, there might be some
Yep.
more questions for you. And so
I'm
with
excited
that,
to hear the next speaker. Thank you.
yeah, thanks again. And now we'll swap over Rafid and Farhan if you're still here. You guys can- Hey.
Hey, Ravi, how you doing?
Well,
You.
Rafid, have fun. Where are you guys calling from? Can you?
I'm in LA right now.
You're in LA. Okay.
I'm actually in Tennessee. I was visiting my family when the shutdown happened, and I never came back.
All right.
Same.
Well, thank you both for coming. So, yeah, please introduce yourselves and pass plates. And
Yeah, so thanks for inviting us. Thanks for the talk, Andrew. It's amazing to hear what kind of all the work that you guys are doing at LeanPath. So my name is Rafid. I am one of the co-founders of Past Plates. And Past Plates was basically born out of the idea that food waste doesn't belong in a civilized human society. We kind of got drawn into the idea mainly because of its environmental impact. Andrew went over a little bit of the numbers. We also kind of wanted to share a little bit of our thoughts as well. 1/3 of all the food produced in the world is either lost or wasted throughout the chain from farm to table. And food waste actually contributes 8% of all greenhouse gas emissions toward the planet. And so what we decided to do was we started working on this last year. What we decided to do was we learned that a lot of restaurants and a lot of businesses don't always sell everything at the end of the day. It might be to a variety of reasons. And as a result, perfectly good food is thrown away on a daily basis. So what we thought was, why don't we create Past Plates and offer an app where you can buy perfectly good unsold food from your favorite restaurants nearby for at least 50% off. So that's what we've been working.
Farhan, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Farhan. I work with Rafid on Past Plates. As he mentioned, it's an app where you can kind of look for food from your favorite restaurants for at least 50% off, and usually it's food that's about to be wasted. As Andrew mentioned, we kind of work on the reclamation side of trying to solve food waste, trying to make sure that food can be diverted into the right channels rather than going to waste. If you guys remember the pictures he was showing of the perfectly good trays and nice sandwiches and all that kind of stuff, that's the kind of stuff that we are trying to let people be able to purchase rather than let it go into the trash. So we've been working on this for about a year now, a little less than a year now, and we're getting really close to our release date, so we're really excited about that. We've been testing internally and it's been going really well. If you're interested, we have a link on our homepage that you can sign up for updates. You can sign up for updates and be notified when our app comes out on both the app stores for you guys to use. As Rafid mentioned, the story is it's a lot about changing attitudes and not as much about changing revolutionizing technology or kind of bringing some crazy new tech. And really it's just about making people realize that this is a golden opportunity, that you could turn loss into profit, and that you could be able to enjoy the foods that you love to eat so much for less, as long as you're willing to pitch in for the environmental impact of it.
Yeah, and you guys have been testing with a few restaurants and bakeries in San Francisco, right?
Yeah, so we actually piloted the program at first within Palo Alto. So right after we graduated, we still had a lot of friends still at Stanford. So what we decided to do was we started knocking and going to like restaurants all over University Avenue and talking to them about food waste and asking them like, hey, is there any way we could help, or you guys have surplus? So we actually collaborated with a dessert shop called Cream, and we tried to help them reduce their food waste to zero. So every day we used to sell like cookies and like not Pop-Tarts, like cookies and brownies and like all these sweets to Stanford students to see like, hey, could we make money? Would people buy this? And after we validated kind of our hypothesis and ran that experiment, we went to San Francisco, because first, you know, you have financial district, you have Mission, you have Embarcadero, you have all these districts in San Francisco that are, people are working, people are living, and you have a concentration of restaurants within walking distance. So what we decided was we tried to reach out and talk to a bunch of bakeries and cafes and restaurants. So some of the restaurants we collaborated and tested it with were Blue Bottle Cafe, were with Phil's Coffee, with other mom and pop shops. And we basically wanted to understand how can we design a business flow on our app that would be seamless, that would be very easy, that would be very engaging with the user. And then we started really building it from there. So as COVID-19 came and hit the other month, we started talking to our users a bit more, and we started to notice that, hey, a lot of pop-up restaurants, even here in LA and in San Francisco, are starting to transition and innovate to become kind of these sort of mini markets, if you will. So instead of doing takeout or delivery, they're converting like the flour that they use to make these baked goods in their bakeries. They're converting the produce, the vegetables, the pasta, the dough that they use in their restaurants, and selling them at almost equivalent, if not lower prices than what you would buy at your big grocery chain, like Ralph's, Vons, Safeway, Food for Less, wherever. So we've been trying to talk to them a little bit more. And one of the things that we did was very minor, but we tried to make a list on our website to connect people in all these restaurants to share what they're offering, you know, what kind of services that they have, and what kind of boxes of items that they have. And we're still keeping in contact with them, putting together the next steps and getting them onboarded on our app as well to help them make the restaurants.
Awesome. Yeah, I saw that, and really interested. Probably like one of the only places you can buy flour now in the Bay Area is as actually from these restaurants. And golden. I mean, if you have flour and yeast, you can sell that for, you know, $1,000 a pound now. It's crazy. Do you guys have any slides or anything you want to share? You can hit screen share if you want.
We don't have slides.
Or the app you want to?
We can share with you our site, but it's kind of like you guys can check it out and sign up whenever you like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no worries.
But if you sign up, we're still kind of doing internal and external testing on the app. And one of the things that we would love, if you guys are willing, would be to test it out with you and have you test it out remotely on like test flight and get your feedback too, and understand how we can better serve your needs and what you think. So feel free to sign up, and we'll reach out to you on that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think many people are going out and like casually going to restaurants and bakeries and stuff right now. But if they're still doing this, yeah, I bet there'd be people. I mean, I definitely want to try it out, and bet some others would want to as well. Is there a way you can show the app now?
Farhan?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, we have, we can, like Rafi mentioned, we can add you to a list and have you internally test the app. But because it's a mobile app, we can't show it to you.
Got it. Yeah.
But if you want to, if you're interested, you want to see it, we can add you to a list and get the app on your phone if you want to check it out and see how it works. And we, you know, that's always an option, but unfortunately, it just doesn't work with the video.
Yeah, so we'll add that in. Yeah, I mean, so I guess so we'll just have a conversation. So people, if anybody's got questions for Rafid and Farhan on Past Plates, just drop it in the chat. So with the changes over from, you know, basically from going from selling normal goods now to selling the raw ingredients, and then you're showcasing this within the app, you see like a greater uptake sort of by your users of that, or is it more the same, or is it more just people staying home?
Yeah, before we decided to kind of partially pivot in this direction, given the situation of the world, we reached out to a lot of users, and we talked to a lot of our friends who are still living around and are self-quarantining themselves around the Bay Area. And we asked them, like, hey, do you find value in buying groceries at a restaurant that can limit the number of people that are able to come in and out versus standing in line with hundreds of people around you and being, you know, worried about getting sick? And they always say that, yeah, they would really love that. And we've been getting a lot of great feedback from them, for sure.
Yeah. So with the testing of, you know, when you got these restaurants or bakeries signed up, you know, and then people around University Ave or in SF or in LA, you know, what was the impact? Did you see a reduction in sort of the, you know, post-consumer or a post-production waste that they had to throw away less food at the end of the day?
Yeah, so because the app isn't live yet for them to use directly, we've only been testing and running experiments. We don't have like enough data to really forecast and understand, like, hey, is this drastically reducing the amount of food waste that you had or that you were having? And are these items that you're selling as alternative groceries helping you survive throughout the pandemic and be able to just see it through until this pandemic and this process is over?
Oh, got it. I thought there was some live testing with earlier.
We've actually done some things before this whole thing started. I think Rafid had mentioned to me, and I remember him doing we had originally tried to see if we could actually bring, you know, also not just have the items on sale, but also like transport them to where people would be. So like we were both at college together, we would like bring like food like onto the college and be like, oh, would you guys buy this for less? And we found that a lot of people were picking it up and a lot of people were interested. And that was also an interesting one. I think what we saw there was like a lot of demand as long as you can reach the market, right? So it kind of made us think about how can we make sure that people who use, like, you know, it's not just about having the food there, and it's also about getting people interested and excited about finding the food as well. Making it kind of an experience that you want to go through is also important. And so that has a lot to do with whether we can reduce the waste or not. So, you know, the food can be great, but it also has to be a good experience for the user as well. That we found plays a big role in like how much actually gets reduced.
Yeah. And sort of, you know, it was a question that was kind of asked and answered by Andrew, but so we're hearing a lot about farmers, you know, destroying eggs or killing chickens or, you know, throwing milk out. And it's sort of similar to, you know, what the app would do of, you know, finding food that's going to be thrown away. Are you guys reaching out to any farms, or have any reached out to you about potentially matching up that product with direct to consumers?
So with farms specifically, that's definitely where a lot of the food waste is coming from. A lot of surplus food is being thrown away from what they've harvested because suddenly restaurants aren't able to buy from them. And so with farms specifically, what we understood was, one, you have to go out to the farms, get this food and transport it to some central location or some food bank, or deliver it to some restaurant or some people who would be willing to buy it. And so that has an enormous cost as to how to go about going and getting to them and then transporting them. And so refrigeration and temperature, and also like, you know, some of these fresh fruits and vegetables, they have a limited amount of time until you can actually get them to the right people for consumption. So we haven't expanded to working with the farms, at least yet.
Got it. Hey, anybody have any questions for Rafid and Farhan? Do you guys have anything else you want to share? If not, we'll just open back up to general questions and maybe go into some breakout rooms.
I could say one thing. I think a lot of what this pandemic has kind of shown us is that there are always going to be unpredictable circumstances. There's always going to be uncertainty. There are always going to be situations where you need to move quickly on your feet. And I think it was mentioned by Andrew earlier in his talk that there's a lot of menu modifications that would be happening. If you were to open a business like a restaurant now, it would be almost like a whole new business. People really have to think about how to, prepare for a post or a COVID-19 type world. And that also kind of highlights the need for there to be an easy way to connect people to the kind of restaurants and kitchens and places like that that are about to waste food. That reclamation part of the pipeline becomes really important, especially when you can't predict, if you can't predict your supply so well, if you can't predict how much people are going to be, buying so well, then you're going to have more, waste. And if we can capture it right before it becomes waste, then that becomes a huge part of it as well. So, forever and for always, there's always going to need to be that part of the pipeline as well. It'll be, they all work hand in hand is the last thing I would say.
One question I have is just, I've been thinking a lot about recovery in this time where people are super sensitive appropriately to sanitation and traceability and understanding who's touched their food and how it's been handled and all those sorts of things. And, it seems like it's one of the tough parts of this. And in fact, I've seen some reporting on it where people are throwing away food that's been recovered and donated because they can't source the provenance of it, and they can't or validate the handling of it. I'm curious if that's something you guys are looking at or how you're thinking about it, because it seems like you would have that provenance pretty clearly defined through your model. I don't know if that's something that's come up or you're thinking about in the product side. It just seems like that assurance would be something that would be important to people and an area you could add value.
Yeah, it's a good idea, actually, what you're mentioning. So since we were really developing before this whole thing hit, and then we kind of had to reevaluate, what was our strategy going to be? Beforehand, we had already kind of considered this idea of people really want to have transparency into and know about the food that they're getting, especially if it's in this kind of situation where, this is food that's about to be wasted, but you're saving it right before then. You still want to know, when was it prepared? How was it handled? That kind of stuff. So actually in our app, we disclose lots of information about the food items because we feel like transparency is really, like you said, integral to getting people to feel like this is a good experience that they're going through and that they feel confident in what they're purchasing. So we do list all sorts of information. We list ingredient information. We list allergen information. We also list when the foods are, the food's prepared date so that people can tell how comfortable they feel with it. I think like you mentioned, there are going to be changes now that, people are more worried about food preparation, who touched my food, how was it prepared, and that kind of stuff. We will have to go back and kind of look at how we could fit that in there as well. I think also we can rely a little bit on government policies, in place about, not allowing, for example, like you mentioned, self-service and kind of maintaining, cleaner sanitation standards and stuff like that. I think we can also rely a little bit on that, but it will be a good idea to add in, whatever information we can add about the food. And that transparency has always been a factor for us. And we'll just kind of continue that with these new parameters like you were mentioning.
Yeah. Yeah, there's an interesting thing. Jack Lee at Data Essential, which is one of the consulting data platforms for food, has been talking about this concept of overt sanitation. Like the idea that it's almost performance, that restaurants are going to have to almost have there's a performance art component in addition to the actual sanitation being seen to be safe and, having the right, sanitizers and behaviors and all those things. And I don't know, it just seems like probably the same thing will be true with all of the technology, all of us.
Yeah. I believe it's Whole Foods, they're putting in thermal cameras. I don't know if that's to see people, foreheads when they come in to see if they've got a fever and, caught the virus 2 weeks ago. So it's too late, but it's a security theater, just like at the airport. So it's like, we feel safe because we've got people that are waving their hands and saying, okay, let me pretend to, check to make sure that, you're a safe passenger and no, this is safe food. But that's not what made it safe. It was something else that, did the magic in the shipment, went under UVC lights or something. And I wonder how that will happen at restaurants. yeah, I think it's a little more difficult. Ron and Rafid, a couple more questions here. So one is, you know, hoping that you expand over here to Oakland, and you know, where do you hope to expand, you know, as you grow? I assume that's everywhere. You know, how do you see how are you thinking about integrating less dense and walkable areas? Is that just like you just need to sort of brute force that and get people that are there? Yeah, how do you include those types of places?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think starting off, you know, when we looked at densely populated cities, we targeted cities like San Francisco, New York, LA, Chicago, and you know, San Francisco, LA, New York, these are big food cities. And our mission, you know, whatever we do, we want it to be, you know, we wanted to back up our decisions from what our core mission and our core values are. So being a company that's trying to tackle food waste and try to help the environment, we wanted to make everything walking distance. We didn't want to have a bunch of cars on behalf of Past Plates collaborating and going about and delivering things and contributing to emissions per se. So at first, per se, like we wanted to look at these big cities, but we're always talking to users and we're obsessively always trying to talk to users to understand what they want and how we can provide value to them. So going forward, if they're like, hey, we're in this not that big of a city, you know, things are kind of spread out, would you do this or would you do that? And we can try to learn from them and understand what are the next steps that would need to be taken in order to accommodate these users in these different range of areas. But right now, we're still talking to users, we're still trying to learn from them, we're still iterating our app, and we will continuously be iterating our app to best fit the needs of our users. And so San Francisco, Oakland, the Bay Area, that's our first area that we're looking at. Then we're reaching out to the rest of California and eventually, you know, the West Coast and big food cities, like I said, in New York City as well. One of the big and easiest things that we thought were really great about Past Plates and the app itself is that there is no specific hassle to sign up and participate. So regardless of where you are in the United States, if you know a business that is struggling to survive, if you know a business that has a lot of surplus food, if you personally want to participate, you can download it. You can sign up, you can have a business sign up, and it doesn't take more than a couple minutes. So from then on, it's very seamless. And so before we start to expand or before we start to reach out and get or try to get every major city in California or the West Coast or the US try to get involved, we wanted to make sure that we started off in a very small area because we know that we're not perfect and we're going to make a lot of mistakes. And we wanted to make sure that these mistakes are handled very well and we learn from them. And we have built something that people not only like, but they love and they keep coming back and it provides value to them. Once we've gotten to that point, then we can go and expand and get people to try to use it in as many places as we can. But if we do that starting off, we know that we're not perfect and we have a lot of mistakes or things here and there, they're little bugs or whatever, then people are gonna be like, oh, you know what, Past Plates, you know, I thought, you know, I was really interested, but you know what, it's not really cutting it for me. And it's gonna be really difficult to get them back. That's one of the biggest strategies and things that we're trying to do and going about it.
Yeah, you can say they might pass on Past Plates. Oh. Andrea and Blandine sort of did a double question. Andrea asked about reducing single-use plastic and perhaps, you know, teaming up with Blandine's company, where I don't know if you were on at the very beginning when she introduced herself. Her company, which I forget the name of, they use, it's a service for restaurants to provide reusable containers. And that might be another, basically an item that's, or, you know, like allergens and ingredients, you might say, oh, this restaurant provides reusable containers, and that becomes part of the service and picked up. Blandine, could you say what your company is again? Either in chat or in
Dispatch Goods.
Dispatched Goods. Yeah, so that might be a good partner for you guys as you build out.
Yeah, most definitely. I think, you know, going back, like what I discussed, what I highlighted was like every decision we make, we try to go back to kind of like our values and like what kind of things do we want to do to make sure that we're going in the right direction, that Past Plates will go for as long as it exists. Like when restaurants deliver food to people through our platform, or offer food to other people through our platform, having sustainable or like biodegradable kind of, you know, packaging would be amazing to our business and like our model. And so going forward, we would love to, like, you know, expand and see what we could do on that for sure.
Yeah, great. There's a question, I think it's more for Andrew. Chris, you talked a little bit about this earlier, but Andrew, it says, I presume schools waste food, you know, how much is that? And, you know, how can they improve if they're taking the students? And your customers, I saw some universities on there, kindergarten and you know, primary schools usually don't have logos, so you can't throw them up on your deck. But
yeah, we do some K-12. Well, yes, we do some K-12. There are a very, very small percentage of the K-12 universe that look like higher ed, you know, boarding schools and things like that, independent schools. But that's like a very small chunk of the K-12 world. We do work in schools. It's not a huge chunk of our business. You know, the school food waste problem has been, I think, in the news quite a lot as we went through meal pattern changes under the Obama administration, where you know, there has historically been a requirement to put a certain amount of food and a certain set of combination of foods on a plate to have a federally reimbursable lunch. And you know, what those items were changed in the Obama administration with a focus on more healthy options and some things that were qualifying as, you know, that didn't seem to make a lot of sense. And there was a lot of political pushback on that. And one of the things that was noted was, you know, was there more waste as a result? And there were some arguments that yes, because, you know, the kids weren't eating this better food, they didn't like it as much as being wasted. You know, studies I'm familiar with show that there was a lot of waste, but there was always a lot of waste. And the difference after the meal pattern changes was they were eating healthier. So there's a little bit of a kind of a push and pull on which research you believe around the dynamics in schools. But one of the major levers there is this concept of offer versus serve. You know, if you make available this set of options that make up a legitimate lunch versus putting a carton of milk and a piece of fruit on every single plate, and the kid then pushes these things into the garbage immediately, you know, that's a big part of it. And share tables certainly have taken hold in a lot of schools where people put the things they're not going to eat on a share table and others can take them. So I would say there's a lot of innovation going on in K-12. Food systems generally, right? School gardens and just educating students about this stuff. But yes, we know there's a lot of waste. Our impression is a lot of it has to do with the choice architecture that's presented to these students in terms of which things are put on their plate and for what reasons. But yes, there's room for improvement there as well. And from my point of view, like, it's hugely important, right? Because if we can raise a group of kids, a generation where the social norms aren't accepting of food waste, right? Where it's just not done, like it's not okay. We'll fix the problem much more easily than trying to change all of us who are, you know, sort of indoctrinated in another way of thinking.
Yeah, great. I think that's a great question to end the Q&A on, because the children are the future. I love puns, man. Anyway, Andrew, Farhan, Ravid, thank you all so much for presenting, and I will share the information that you sent. If there's a specific link for the test trial to test out, you know, be beta testers for the app, you can send that to me or an email. You know, I'll put that into the email to everybody with the, you know, link to the recording. And with that, I'm going to end the recording now. And then we can do some breakouts and chat some more, or we can go off and get into our own gardens. So thank you all. Plant some food, have bees, put some chickens in your backyard, and don't waste your food. All right. Thank you. Oh.